that book is a little weird for me because I I was my wife and I and our kids were still living in Omaha when I wrote that book, and I was imagining this sort of quaint wooded cul-de-sac in the bluffs of western Iowa, and so I invented one. I made up the town and I invented this circle of neighbors, and right before the book came out, we moved to Council Bluffs, which is like Omaha, Missouri River, Council Bluffs. And we moved to a quaint wooded cul-de-sac in the bluffs of Western Iowa. So it's like I'm living in Sycamore Court now. Like there's no creepy neighborhood watch, but like the set, it's just bizarre how similar the setting where I live now is to the book that I would, the setting that I invented in my mind. I must have had some kind of a private desire to live in a place like that, maybe without the crazy neighborhood watch. In my mind, it is not a political novel, but the idea for it came out of a political discussion I was having with a colleague at work. This was, in the early 2000s, it was after 9/11, and it was, we were in the whole WMD invade Iraq period. And my colleague and I were having a discussion, argument, debate, whatever, about the concept, the sort of philosophical concept of strike first policy, I guess. Like, is it permissible to, like, if you think somebody's going to do something to you, is it morally okay to do it to them first to protect yourself, right? And so like it was those conversations that I was having in my day job with a colleague that made me just start thinking about that concept. And I just started reducing that down to a neighborhood. And that's kind of where the idea of an overzealous neighborhood watch came from, where they're on the lookout for any possible red flags, and it's not enough to just be aware of the red flag. They're going to do something about it before the red flag becomes a problem. And that's where the idea of Roger came from, that sort of like reflection on, whether first strike is okay or not. Is the best defense a good offense, I guess. There is an entire genre of thrillers that are domestic based thrillers, but for me, it was less about trying to like get in on that subset of thrillerdom and more about continuing to move my work closer to my own life. I mentioned how my first books were set in California and I finally started setting them in Nebraska. Well, the Safer, it's my one, two, three, four, fifth book, but that's the first book where the characters in it actually resemble me more, like that. The characters are college professors and regular job working type people who live in a sort of urban suburban setting. I mean, that I was trying again to move my work a little bit closer to the life that I actually live, as opposed to being a down on his luck cop, which I'm not and never have been. I was writing about people I actually could identify with as a person. I had this idea for this kind of like Locked Island story, I guess, but the original nugget, I didn't really know what to do with it, and my first thought was somewhere on the East Coast. And then as I started developing this idea, I was trying to figure out, okay, what do I spend my time thinking about nowadays? What do I care about? And like social media seemed to be something that was on my mind a lot at that time. And, for good and for bad. And then I thought, okay, maybe something in that area. And that sort of naturally took the idea to the West Coast, and then I thought, when I was in college, I don't know what years you were in college, but I was in college in the early 90s, right during sort of what I think of as peak Seattle. Grunge was happening and people were learning what Starbucks was. And it seemed like for a while there in the early 90s, when Nirvana was taking over the world, everybody was talking about Seattle. to the point that my dad, who is not, necessarily loves to take vacations, but isn't necessarily, edgy or, adventurous outside the mainstream. He wanted to check out Seattle because everybody was talking about it. So I took the last family vacation I went on with my folks. I was in college. I took some time out to go visit Seattle with them, and I was so taken with Seattle. And so, all right, so now I've got this idea about college friends who are going to reunite. They became lifelong friends in the early 90s, which is when I went to school. And they're going to, life has happened and they've gone their separate ways, but they've stayed in touch. They're going to reunite in their 50s, kind of that sort of Big Chill sort of setup. And so it all sort of like my desire to talk about social media, this idea for this sort of like Locked Island story, and being able to look back to my own college years and my own sort of trip to Seattle when I was, figuring out who I was as a person as well. That all just really fit together nicely for that book. I would think. I'm not good at mysteries, where you seed a story with lots of little clues, that somebody follows and then it, leads to a revelation. But I actually found writing that part a little bit tedious because I had to think up clues. I'm more the, characters do things and then things happen and then they do things and then more things happen kind of writer. So like coming up with the clues that they had to discover to type into the tablet was actually a little tedious for me, although it became fun because it's another opportunity to just develop those characters further. I mean, that's my favorite part of writing is characters. It's if I have anything with me from Stephen King to this day, it would be that attention to character and the feeling you get when you're with characters that feel real to you. And so, using the clues as another opportunity to develop the characters became fun. I did not know who was going to make it, and like one of my very favorite characters in the book, and I won't like reveal who right on this, in this forum, but like one of my very favorite characters is one who doesn't make it, and I didn't know who. I got to a point in the book again. I'm I've used this analogy before, but are you familiar with the claymation series Wallace and Gromit?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the very first Wallace and Gromit, there's this glorious finale piece where Gromit is on a model train, either chasing or running from the bad guy penguin. And he's on the train. He's got a box of tracks in his paw, and he's laying down tracks in front of the moving train and like going through the furniture, and like he's laying down track as fast as the train is moving. And that's kind of like the way I felt while I was writing that book. So I was laying down the tracks in front of the moving train, and I got to a place in the book where I realized, there's got to be, the stakes have to rise here. Just the instincts that I've developed over the course of writing 7 other novels. I just had the very strong feeling that I'm in a place in this novel where the stakes have to go up. And for me, the stakes going up were, somebody's got to be in danger. Maybe they're going to die. Maybe they're going to be in some kind of trouble. I don't know what. But when I came to decide that one of the group had to die, then this is the first book that I've written that has a kind of a large cast of main characters. I mean, there's 7 friends that I'm trying to like give equal time to in this narrative. And it became a little bit of a juggling act. But then I was left with at least 6 people to choose from, like who's going to be the one to get it in the neck. And the way I made the choice was that I wanted it to matter. Like I wanted you to feel it, and I wanted it to have some impact and some weight. And so I picked my favorite character, and it just happened. It happened to work the way the plot was working at that point. Without giving too much away, the way the plot of Device Free Weekend works is everybody goes to a fancy house on an island. And at one point in the story, the house locks down with them inside. Only there's been a wrinkle, and when the house locks down, a couple characters are outside and the rest of the characters are inside. So the groups get separated from between the outside people and the inside people. And it just so happened that this character was one of my outside people, and he was, one of the easiest ones to actually put in a position where he would be in jeopardy. And so that's how my favorite character died in Device Free Weekend.
Was it hard to kill him?
Yeah, and it's the most common comment I get from people is, "I can't believe you killed so and so." So in that sense, like, while I sense that readers are a little bit miffed with me when they say that, it's evidence that that decision had the impact that I wanted it to have, which is that people cared.